Next, lockdown and domestic violence. For people in abusive relationships, lockdown made it harder to leave, and for many, it also meant the violence increased. That's according to the first in-depth research about the impact of the coronavirus outbreak on the scale and nature of domestic abuse. It was carried out by the charity Women's Aid and is a subject of a Panorama special tonight. Here, the Swindon Domestic Advice Service says requests for help have increased sharply. We've been hearing from one victim who sought help.
To start with, the relationship was absolutely perfect. Then it went downhill very, very quickly. At first, he used to slap me sometimes, but he was always very apologetic. He wouldn't do anything for a month or so, but then it was more and more. Hitting me, throwing me down the stairs, pulling my hair, choking me. Anything. It varied from day to day. I was constantly covered in bruises and didn't want to deal with questions from people, so I just completely isolated myself. I pretty much stayed in for over a year. I didn't have any friends and no contact with my family. I was pregnant too. It was just awful. I read about the refuge and managed to escape from him one day. I called them and they got me in almost immediately. Life is so much better now. I think I'm more aware, and if I did get into another relationship, I'd be able to recognise the red flags. I've had a massive weight lifted off my shoulders not being with him.
A short time ago, I spoke to Emma Rawlings, who's the Chief Executive of the Swindon Domestic Advice Service. Referrals to their refuge centre increased by more than 60% between June and July. I asked her if there should have been more support from the government when we entered lockdown.
They did do a lot towards, once the lockdown was in progress, and we saw money coming through, especially for domestic abuse and ring-fenced domestic abuse from the Ministry of Housing and from the Ministry of Justice. But unfortunately, what we found is that funding is only a pot of funding which takes us to the end of October. Therefore, what happens after October? And it would have been really good to have seen that this pot of funding continues for the rest of this at least financial year. Because obviously, if we put measures in place to support people, we can't then all of a sudden, when the funding stops, say, OK, well, we can't support you anymore. So that would be my recommendation.
Some people would have been very early in relationships before they moved in with people at the start of lockdown. Did you notice any change in the calls you were getting?
Yes, we did, exactly. In the first couple of weeks, we did see that there were calls coming through from younger females, and that leads us to believe that, new relationships which had just recently been formed, that they didn't want to be apart from each other, so they decided to live with each other and stay together. And obviously then the cracks started forming and we started seeing those calls coming through. What
signs should people be looking for if they think they're experiencing domestic abuse of any kind for the first time?
It's a perpetrator. It will want control. So it's about controlling them, asking them where they're going, why they're wearing this, having access to their phone, putting spyware on their phone. It's about isolation and isolating them from their family and their friends. So limiting the contact they have with their network of established people, and it's gradually bringing that in. Drip feed, so that they then have complete control over that victim. And we've seen it today with Victoria Sillars talking about the control that she's now realised that she was being, happening to her with her husband, who obviously eventually tried to kill her.
Regardless of lockdown, many victims of domestic violence find it too hard to leave their partners. What needs to change in the approach to domestic abuse and domestic violence to help those people?
Having the resource, raising awareness, absolutely critical that this is not acceptable behaviour, this is not a healthy relationship, and there's organisations like ours, like Swindon Domestic Abuse Support Services. We're here with our helpline, a 24-hour helpline, 365 days a year, for people to phone up and start talking to us, and we can start putting that support in and supporting them and their children and their family.
Emma Rawlings, thank you.
Thank you.
And you can watch Panorama Escaping My Abuser with Victoria Derbyshire tonight at 7:30 on BBC One.